I'm John Nymeyer. I've lived in Bristol since 1947. I've got a painting of the hardware store as it was when it was finally torn down. And my dad, we'll talk more about this later, but my dad worked, I was born in Mishawaka, and I lived in government housing, government temporary housing, which is still there for World War II. And my dad worked for Ball Band, and he was a chemist, and he had a degree in business too. And he was the head of a team that developed rubber fuel cells that fit on the inside of bomber gas tanks, so that if a bullet went through it, it would seal itself back up and not leak. So they did that, and once the war was over, and then so I grew up in red ball jets. I'm sure somebody else had them here too. But eventually, he always wanted to be, but he still wanted to have his own business. And I don't know how he found it, but in early 1947, he found the store, which I've got pictures of, and we had no idea. I was 47, so I was what, 4 years old when we moved here. And so we had no idea what was going on. So we came over and we looked at it and we thought, oh, that was cool. So Dad paid, in 1947, he paid $5,500 for the whole hardware store, all of the stock, and all this, another building back here, and all the property back in here, and this building over here. $5,500 But that was a lot of money in 1947. And the cool thing is, he never paid it off, because if he'd get money ahead, he'd fix it up some more. And so, and I can tell you, the first winter we spent upstairs in there, literally the water in the toilet froze at night. And you'd use your washcloth hanging on the towel bar, and you wake up in the morning, you have to crack it open. And, and you think that now, and we had a bathtub. We called it a two-pan tub, because it had a drain. It was made out of tin with a wooden edge on it, but it had a drain. So if you were going to take a bath, you got 2 pans of hot water, and they added enough cold water that you could get in. So the water was about that deep, if you can imagine. And we, 5 of us, well, 4 of us, my brother was born 10 years later, we survived in that for several years. Didn't think anything about it. People were still using outhouses, and we thought, well, at least we can take a bath inside. And so it was quite a building, and the wind would whistle through the cracks. And so late, I don't know what year, but if you remember, this was covered with brown kind of it's siding that overlaps. And my dad and my uncle did all that. And so if you read the sign, you'll see Nymeyer Brothers Hardware. And that's the way it started out. My Uncle Fred was in World War II, and he came home, and my dad talked to him about it, and he said, okay, I'll be a partner. And Dad said, all right. So they had a deal and started out. Well, it ended up, finally it was a disaster. And Fred said, well, really, I don't like people. I said, well, great. That's the way it worked. And back in those days, everything came into the depot down here on the train. So we got so tired saying, it's down at the depot, it's down at the depot. We'd have to run down there and get what it was, come back, and you look at it now, you think, oh my gosh, but back then it was fun, and nobody thought anything about it. Okay, it's down at the depot, it'll be here tomorrow. Not anything. Well, Fred finally got a job, and the building is still there. It's over near where the John Deere dealership used to be in Goshen, was a Studebaker garage. And Fred got a job working in there on Studebakers, and finally became a mechanic, and eventually became a Goshen mailman. But he hated it, and we had more fun down there because he was goofy and his wife was goofy, and we repaired windows and all that stuff. Well, we had cans of putty back there. So we'd make little balls out of putty, and we'd fire those things around the store at each other. And my dad just, he about blew his stack. So it was a good thing Fred left. And they left, and he still lived in Bristol, and the house, let's see, not this one on the corner, the next one down, their apartment was upstairs there for 2 or 3 years. That's where they lived, and finally he went to Goshen. So that was our beginning. And I might say that I've said, okay, I was 4 years old. One day in this wintertime, we moved in, and I had this knock at the door, the back door, which is up a flight of stairs, and there's a little porch back there. And this little kid with a bombardier cap on, pinched under his chin, and said, "Is there anybody live here that I can play with?" And so it ended up being Pinky Mosier. And so from that time on until this day, we're best buddies. But spring came, and there was a knock on the door, and there's this little red-headed kid. And my mom looked at him and says, "Well, who are you?" "Well, I'm Waymond." He was all bent out of shape. We didn't know he had red hair. We'd never seen him without that hat. And so, honestly, it's a wonder Pinky and I are still alive. I could tell stories that...
Boy, if that isn't true.
Okay. Okay, now Bickles were the previous owners. Not the previous owners. The pictures all pass around, say Bickle. But Bickles had sold it to another guy, and I've never been able to figure out who he is. I think the last name started with an H, but I won't swear to it. And they didn't have it a real long time until Dad bought it. And then we ran it until it closed in the 70s. This house is right here, and there was early was the telephone office. Fred Hilbesh. He and Maine lived there. Oh my gosh. And they had an outhouse. Well, they had the old switchboard. We could look out the window and look down into the yard, and we'd see one of the operators heading for the outhouse, and we'd say, "Well, nobody's going to make a call in town for at least 10 minutes." And so they lived there, and they were quite a character. And I went out with Fred in his Model A truck. A lot of times somebody called, our phone was out of order, and he had them strung on fence posts, anything that he could hang the wire on. But it was an education, and he was a great guy, and Mame was kind of, I don't know. They lived like paupers because she saved every penny for their kids, and many nights all Fred had for supper was Wheaties or cornflakes. And both of their boys were well-to-do, and yet I'm going to save this money for my kids. So, you're warned. Okay, we sold everything from, as the years went around, and we had the regular hardware, and I'll pass. This is a picture of the outside, horse and buggy there, and there's these well-pipe tie-up racks here. You'll see them as it comes around. Those were there until, oh golly, late 60s, early 70s when the town put in new sidewalks. Then they cut them off. And there's a couple that are still in the ground down by Sally Burke,
Sally Burton.
Yeah, and her house, and there's a couple there that are on posts and they got a ring on top. Mm-hmm. And so this is what the place looked like, 1940, well, I don't know when the date is, and pass it around. And the inside was, as you would imagine, an 1800 or early 1900s hardware store, and we had, I see a couple of the old push lawnmowers. I call them Amish mowers now, but I can remember we had this machine in the back that we sharpened those real lawnmowers for people, and that was really kind of neat. So here's a picture of the inside of the store with the two guys, I'm assuming, that owned it or at least worked there. And then here's another one. This is later on, W.W. Bickle, stoves and tinware. And there's an old bicycle parked out front, and as you can see on this side, there was an open place, and then next was that building. It wasn't it was right in there. So Pinky and I'd play in there, but the telephone office is right next door.
Down, the one in between or something?
This?
That one? Yeah, they tore
No,
that
there
one.
was nothing there.
Is that where Ike's Barbershop
Oh, here,
used to be?
yeah,
No.
yeah,
This
yeah.
That was.
Yeah, that was where he ended up.
Oh,
And Mike Walters opened a little restaurant called Good and Plenty.
Yep.
Remember years ago? That was in that same building. And so Dad used the upstairs for storage, and so we had it for quite a while. Okay, then here's one. Stoves and tinware with a guy outside, and it's unreal. I can remember looking like this. And this is W.W. Bickle. So they owned it for quite a while. And there used to be a Pete Bickle in town. He lived right next door to Pinky for years. And of course, now I don't remember all the details. And this is the most interesting, and Rosemary may help us out. Years ago, I don't know the date, 1901, two guys got in a fight, and I'll let her tell it, and they ended up out in front of the hardware store, and the one guy died or hit his head on the sidewalk, and they went out and planted an X on the sidewalk, and this picture shows the X where his head banged on the concrete. So, all right, Rosemary.
Okay, John brought me this picture, and I had a copy made. This was my, Richard Sherwin, who was my great uncle, was a person that owned a lot of property in Bristol. He was a businessman, he was really doing well, and he also had a livery stable about where the telephone place is. It was 100 feet back from the road.
Okay.
And across the road was the other livery stable, and I can't remember.
Samples.
Okay,
Samples.
anyway, it was across the street. And they didn't get along. And one day in 1901, they had an argument in the middle of the street. And the son of the gentleman that had the other livery stable came out with a bat or some stick or something and hit Richard Sherwin over the head, and he fell there where that X is. Well, my grandfather, Solomon Sherwin, was his brother, and he came into town, and he went, and they took Richard home. He was still alive then. But anyway, my Solomon Sherwin, my grandfather, took a train to Elkhart so he could get an attorney. And they did have a trial, and the boy was given a sentence to go to jail. And he did go, and I understand from reading later on that he maybe was there for a couple of years, and then they let him go. But in the meantime, Richard Sherwin died in 1901, and he had owned all kinds of places. He even owned where the railway, the little, by the bank where the station from the Valley Line would come and stop. He owned that property, and I found in the newspapers where his widow sold the property. And he was apparently a great guy. And the funny part is, my father never ever mentioned him. Now, my father was 56 when I was born, and all the other relatives were dead, so maybe it was just an old story and he didn't tell it. But I did not know it until I looked it up in the Bristol Banner, and I saw the story, and then John brought me the picture so I could put all the pieces together. But I had not known of him. But now his grave is in the Oak Ridge Cemetery, so I do know where he is. But
So now when you walk in front of the Ed Jones place, some guy died right there on the sidewalk. So
and I didn't know it until I read it in the newspaper, and then John showed the picture.
okay, well, my dad, my grandfather on my mom's side retired from BIHS after years and years, and he was itching to work in the store. So then we needed more storage space. We didn't have garage. So in the 50s, we built this building, and Arvid Swanson built it. And this was the garage, this was the garage, and this is the door. We had all the pipe and everything, the pipe cutter, all that stuff. So people needed a piece of pipe, you go out there and cut it. So that building is still there today, and it served a great purpose. But before that building, if you can imagine, from here about down to here, was a high red board fence. And next to the fence was a full-size barn. Big old red barn, right in town. And we had a chicken coop all around the other side of the barn. And it was unbelievable. You know, tell people that there was no barn in town. And there sure was at that time. And I believe that the only paved streets in town were 15 and 120. None of the others were. Straight boy out in the country. So anyhow, now it looks like this, and that's where we are. Now here's a picture of, this is in 1949. That's the year I started grade school. And here's a picture of my mom standing in there and working at it.
Nice looking lady.
And while that's going around, we heated, believe it or not, there was a coal stove downstairs and 2 oil burners upstairs to heat that whole place. And well, I mentioned, we froze to death. And so, I don't know if I remember, there was a big storm or something, and the Zion Lutheran Church had some major damage. I don't know if anybody remembers that. It would have been late 40s, early 50s. And they had a big old octopus furnace, you know what that was? Coal, and it had all these pipes going out in every direction. And they said, Dad, if you want it, you can come get it. It's yours, so get it out of here. So he got that, put it in the basement, they hooked all that up, and then heated the house with coal for years until Bristol finally went to gas. But I can remember, did you ever watch the movie, The Christmas Story? Mm-hmm. And when the dad with the furnace and shaking, that was my dad. And you know, we can't imagine that today. We couldn't go anywhere in the wintertime. You had to get home in order to keep the fire going. And if not, you'd go out in the house and freeze. And so if you went away, then my dad, he always called it banking the fire. And they'd go down, and then for the night, they'd pile the stuff up along the edges. And it would burn and keep falling down in so that it would last all night. And my dad was not a cusser, but he served 3 years in the Merchant Marines. But he'd go down there, and I could tell the fire was out. In order to get it going, they had a chimney and had a metal box. You had to open the box, light a piece of paper, and put it in there to get the draft going in the chimney. Then you'd light the fire in the furnace. And eventually we'd have smoke coming up the registers. But, you know, it was, everybody was living like that. Yeah, well, in the Pinky, the Banner office had a stoker.
Yeah, stoker.
Yeah. So it was quite of an experience living up there, but we loved it. Later on, I played the trumpet, my brother played the drums, and we stand out in that porch and serenade the whole town. And that was a lot of fun. We got a lot of comments on that. The store began to fail. It was really doing well for a long time. But the problem is there were 2 hardware stores in town. And if you can believe that this town supported 2 hardware stores for years, and Scammahorns were there, and they kept going, and Dad just finally said, I can't go on like this, we're losing money. And so in the mid-60s, late 60s, probably early 70s, yeah, probably the mid-70s, they rented the store out, and we stayed up there for a while. And they sold it to they rented it to a guy, and he had a slot car racetrack down there. If you remember that, and people come in, spend the evening racing, and that kind of fizzled out. And then he sold the business to the McDaniels family. So they bought it, and for years they had a dairy store in there.
Reliable dairy.
Reliable dairy. And okay. So okay. In the 80s, the building was sold to the town of Bristol, and they left it there for a while. Then they tore the whole thing down, and that corner was vacant. It was a park for a while, and then I guess I don't know all the details about what's in there now. And one thing, and it was still there, in front of the store here, right here's the front doors. There are two of them. They open like this. The one on the right, down in the bottom corner, had a tin patch, that big square. And the story was that sometime in the past that a big lightning bolt came down and blew a hole through that door and just about lit up the whole town. And so they put that metal patch, and it was still there to that day until they tore it down. In the 60s. Now we're going to go to the popcorn stand. First of all, you got a good thing is, one of the alumni things one time, what business in town could you buy live bait, popcorn, and hula hoops? And it was here. And so Dad, he tried everything, to keep it going. And so the Key Bank bought Ike's building where he was. And I can remember going in Ike's building where there was a sign that said, haircuts now $1, still a bargain. And I guess it was. But $1 was a lot then. So when they tore that down, Ike moved over here and rented this out. And then later, Mick Walters rented it. And then there was a Chinese restaurant there for a little while. And then they tore the whole thing down. I don't know. I've never been able to find out when the building was built, huh?
Don Ray Driveway was in that building?
Yeah.
And so was Floritan, owned by Vicki Myers.
And Arnold and Betty Hartley lived in there for years and years. Okay, the popcorn stand. I don't want to take up with time. My dad had a friend. He lived up in Three Rivers. His name was Walt Niederheiser. And I don't know where he met him, how he knew him, but Walt had 3 of these popcorn stands. And if you ever remember, any of you ever go into Three Rivers, and then, I don't know if it's at 30 that you take into town.
60.
60. So again, you go up to 60, come up to Main Street and stop, and right there on the left was a popcorn stand, looked just like that. And then he had another one down further back. There's a park down there, it's still there. And they had ducks and animals, we had one, and there was one in there. But he had this one sitting, not doing anything. So my dad was always looking for something, so he bought it and moved it in. And I don't remember the exact year. I know I was home and still in school. And we sold popcorn. Best popcorn in town, the only popcorn in town. We fixed this up, and things are so different then. Families would go out on a Sunday afternoon. They'd say, let's go to Bristol and get some popcorn and caramel corn, And Sunday afternoon was one of our busiest times. Judy's mom used to work in there. I worked in there.
Mr. Nymeyer would not have been very happy. There were kids in Bristol that didn't have much, and my mom would give away popcorn. And she would just stick $1 in the box. She made absolutely nothing, but she enjoyed the children so much and the social that she just loved working in there. And I think she knew every gossip in town.
I'm sure. And I didn't mention, if you can see back there, the little boy on the tricycle right here, that's Terry Miller.
Junior Miller's son.
Junior Miller's son, yeah.
And Marilyn.
And Marilyn's brother, yeah. And so that's when this was painted.
Harding's lady Marilyn?
Yeah. Everybody thought she owned Harding's, remember? We talked at her funeral, it was funny. What you thought? And what was the other lady? Lucy. Lucy and Marilyn owned Harding's, and we were shocked when we found out they didn't.
Remember when they dyed their hair because they were afraid they were going to lose their job?
Marilyn, they both have that beautiful white hair. Oh,
Dyed it, and I thought,
Really? Wow.
Well, we sold a big bag of popcorn, about that tall, so big around, for 10 cents. We sold a grocery bag full for 50 cents back in those days. My mom, Walt also made caramel corn. And so we bought this marble table with edges around it that had fans built in it. And then my dad would, back in those days, caramel corn was so hard to eat because it was stuck together in big gobs. And well, he had developed this method. We had a marble table, and Dad had dumped that thing out there and spread it out, and we turned those fans on, and we just kept going like this until when it was finally dry and hard, there was every kernel was single, and people always counted. So caramel corn cost $0.25, and then my mom,
Labor intensive.
yeah, and my mom, she'd made all kinds of candy, and I can remember yet, it came in 10-pound Hershey bars. 10-pound Hershey bar. You have, oh man, I was in heaven. And Bill and I'd go down there and try to, peel off a corner or something. Well, they'd say, well, it's a mice, Dad. It was a mice. I'd say, well, it's a big mouse. And we also had an old antique peanut roaster. So Dad would buy raw peanuts, get them in there, we'd soak them in salt water, and then roast them in and then sell the peanuts in the popcorn stand. We sold pop or soda, and it was a neat place. And remember old Chet Spar? He'd come through town once in a while on Sunday. He'd get a bag of popcorn or something, or we'd give him one. And homecoming was big time, man. We raked in the bucks at a dime a bag. Another cool thing is the popcorn stand. The guy at the Montville Speedway contacted Dad once and said, hey, we have, was it Saturday night or Friday night? We have races up in Montville during the summer. And he said, we'd like to sell popcorn. So they made a deal, and every Saturday afternoon, we popped 6 lard cans full of popcorn and delivered them up to Montville. And then the next Monday or Tuesday, they'd bring the cans back, and we'd pop 6 more. So kept them in popcorn for a long time.
It paid for John's college.
It helped. And that, I might mention that because when the store was really starting to fade, this popcorn stand kept it in business for about 2 years. Really. Wow. Now this picture, this is a painting. Back in the day, people would come from Elkhart, and I don't know if you remember seeing, they'd set up easel on the sidewalk, and they'd be sitting there drawing and painting. Well, this one lady was doing this one, and my mom said, oh, we'd love to have that when you're done. And somehow she bought it or got it. And I just had, let's see, what's her name? Lori Eads out here north of town that does the pretty stuff. She made 3 beautiful copies of this, and I sent one to each of my brothers, and I gave one to the library. So it's going to be in Rosemary's history room. And so basically that's it. It was a wonderful life. I've said many times I wouldn't trade $1 million for my life growing up in Bristol in the 50s, 60s, and you knew everybody, everybody knew you. When I was teaching school, they'd say, Mr. Nymeyer, did you ever skip school? I said, no, I never skipped one day. Well, they wouldn't believe me. They'd say, why not? I said, because I knew everybody in town, they knew me, and they'd call down to the hardware store and say, hey, Hank, John's out here wandering around. So, and Huey Harker, if you remember him, just to add on to that, he had some buildings out back and Harry Browning behind the bank, and there was a couple we could squeeze in there, and Pinky and I were in there. We were smoking one time, and I don't know if the smoke was coming out, but Huey caught us, and we said, "Oh no!" And we said, "Please, Hugh, don't tell us. Are you going to tell our dads?" And he said, "Nope, you are, and I'm going to call to check." And I about died during supper. That was back then. That was a big deal. So. Anyway, if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. But it was a fun life. I wouldn't trade it for anything. And
that's great, John. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That was